key part is that actually the operator, all they want to do is be able to run a meeting and go, microphone, can I hear? Yes. How do I keep these votes running? If you've got people in a chamber and working remotely, maybe bringing an extra chamber in, as will undoubtedly happen in these government reorganisations. Well, if we design that from the beginning, it can happen seamlessly.
So welcome back to the Govtech show, and today we're very privileged because we've got the highly experienced Stephen Rushton, who is a corporate director over at GVAV, and his background, as I understand it, is as a consultant to large organisations, particularly councils. So welcome, Steve, to the show. Good to have you on.
Thanks very much for that introduction, Daniel. Yes, great to be with you. Spent 25 years in AV now, so
wow. So you
time flying, having fun.
So you're now with as a corporate director for GVAV. Could you describe GVAV in the context of supporting councils who are thinking about refurbishing their council chambers and their committee rooms and various other projects that are related to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that don't know us, GVAV is one of the largest integrators in the UK. Certainly the strongest national AV provider with the most branches. So we actually, last year we did £61 million worth of AV integration business.
Wow.
We do that from our 6 branches. So we have branches in Exeter, London, Coventry, Manchester, Newcastle and Dundee.
Would you be willing to say a little bit about your journey to GVAV? Obviously, GVAV would be regarded as one of the larger AV system integrators in the UK, and I know that you go beyond that, but your personal journey to GVAV, because you've got a wealth of experience, and I think you've been working within the public sector for quite a while, and hopefully a bit later on we'll be able to tease out from you what the difference is when you've worked in retail or the private sector and now you're working in the public sector. What are the pros and cons of that, and is there anything that councils can learn from your vast experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started off 25 years ago, crossing the boundaries from being in the live realm of audio and then that and production, and more into the installed AV side of things. Since then, I've been fortunate enough to grow into much larger, more prestigious things. I've been installing up to maybe £10 million of AV into any given building sites and in the built environment or existing site. Sectors for those included corporate, financial, government institutions, as well as, for instance, I was fortunate enough to help in writing some of the AV standards for the Government Property Agency a few years back as part of my consultancy role.
Wow. And then arriving as you are now into GVAV in this particular role, what's the direction of travel for you?
So I thought it was a really exciting opportunity. It was just towards the end of 2024 that GVAV approached me. GVAV obviously being very well known in the public sector. You'll probably recognise a lot of their cut clients, including places like University of Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, King's. They're all GVAV clients. So they wanted someone to actually sort of formally head up and look after that kind of more corporate side. So looking after corporate enterprise and gov spaces and really give that drive. And someone obviously approached myself with that experience, having consulted from many of those places and been working.
So part of your role then is to drive your relationship between GVAV and local councils and the projects that they're looking to take forward.
Absolutely. I think bring some of that sort of national strength together, and then but also linking up with some of the local support, which is often required on the ground as well.
And how might that look, Steve? If you think of the large project that you've recently been involved in, and I know that you've won that project, but others of a similar nature, what would the process be? So if I was listening to this program and I wanted to see, well, what was the journey that you go on from a project point of view? So what's the beginning of that process? And then what are the key stages as you move through? Presumably at some point there is a tender, or if not, is it on a framework? You know, how do you balance all of that? But that journey is important in terms of our listener might find that interesting to see behind the curtains, if you like.
Absolutely. So I've been involved across all the Reba stages, from the start of is a building even a good starting fit for this project? Does it work from an audiovisual perspective? The Reba 2, we might start building up some different directions that things might take, some high level budgets, some high level possibility, stripping back, not just saying, what meeting rooms, what those meeting rooms going to achieve. It might be that we want to have Teams meetings. We know that if the average meeting now is 6 people, they're meeting at least one remote participant. So how do we support that? As we come to council spaces, you will be aware of the new legislation saying that a council chamber should, it supports in person, but how do we make that work hybridly? How do we start bringing those votes in from people outside the chamber and working simultaneously in a way that meets the legislation?
Oh yeah, this new legislation. Although we've been waiting for that legislation for quite a while. You're referring to the proxy voting, and hybrid meetings stuff, which is obviously very much Civico's world. I think we've been waiting for this legislation that Angela Rayner announced some time back, and it's still not gone through Parliament, as far as I know.
Yes, we've got a little bit of time to go, but I think it would be
It'll be imminent.
to be able to write and as we're installing new AV systems that we'd hope they may be warranted for maybe 5 years, but actually you'd hope the last 10 years it'd be foolish not to invest in the right system now that's going to last the test of time.
Well, that's one of the things I've learned about you. So you and I have been out to a couple of projects that we've worked collaboratively on, and I notice in a way that I don't always see with lesser SIs is there are things that you're not willing to ignore. So I remember in one project there was a possibility of asbestos. So somebody else may say, well, let's deal with that after we've won the project. You are absolutely adamant, in my experience, of teasing out all of the difficult issues and getting them on the table before you start putting together a response to a specification.
Absolutely. I think planning is key for these things. It's having worked in this built environment for a long time. On all the Reba stages, from Reba 1 through to Reba 7. Going on to business as usual. How do we make sure that what things work from the beginning of the project through that design, taking it out to market, making sure that we get the right design come from market, and then getting that delivered and on site. And if you don't plan around asbestos and your timelines there, if people say there's asbestos and not take into account the time it's going to need for the surveys, or if there's a survey and says yes there is asbestos, then how do we pull that out in a timely way? You're going to find that AV integrators aren't licensed to be able to remove that asbestos, so it's going to need a third-party contractor. If it's
seeing the way that you painstakingly, you're constantly consulting is my experience of you, is that even though the council may have a specification, you're actively engaged with that specification to try and further shape it in order that the client gets exactly what they need from that particular project. Because I think you and I would agree, there's no point in responding to a ITT or a request for tender specification if, when you look at it, you can look at it and say, well, that's just not going to work. That's not going to deliver what that particular council wants. So what I've seen you do is constantly iteratively engage with that, either through the questions or whenever you've done a site visit.
That's right. I think there's part one is what do we want this room to do, but the part, we have to get those the little details have to be right to make sure this works going forward. We're an offer integrator. I'm not in the business consulting on and providing solutions for something that's going to work for 6 months and then it's going to be binned. And then we're going to have to go on to something else. What we're about is long-term relationship. That's something for me, but not only for me, but for GVAV. You'll find that GVAV has some of the longest lasting relationships with clients because we're there. We're there to form a relationship. I don't want to just install the system. How do I make sure it's good enough that it's going to work for everybody? How do I make sure it's composed of the right components? It's going to have a long lifespan. And then how do I support it how I support it best if the system is built solidly from the beginning
Yeah.
and delivers. And it's
And
technology; things will
yeah.
go wrong. But I can then also, for instance, it's a little bit more money. But if I stick in a proactive monitoring system, I can know that every single component is working in there, and therefore I can know before anyone walks in the room whether anything's dropped offline. Maybe we need to organise an engineer visit. Maybe it's something we
Yeah.
can do remotely.
Yeah,
That
real time telemetry and system monitoring is becoming more and more in vogue at the minute. In order, we find when we get involved in that you're actually saving the client money because you're aware of a problem before they're aware of a problem. You're able to prepare and respond to that issue even before they're aware that there is an issue. So it means their downtime is less, and presumably also, certainly with our system, when we would work together, that you're able to triage a lot of those things remotely, increasingly so.
that's right. I mean, this is where some of the pre-engagement becomes clear
Mm.
and helpful for people as they go to tender. If you've put in there the proactive monitoring is required, if you put in there that IP-based power distribution units are part of the specification, it allows an AV integrator to be able to remotely reboot. Or if you've
Yeah.
talked about how you may be able to talk to those systems remotely in a secure way, then it means it can be supported, and we know that we can actively fix equipment that's fallen over quite often remotely. But obviously, that's all monitoring. That all needs to go into some kind of
Yeah.
service desk, and occasionally you will need to have engineers that can get to site very quickly.
Which is great. And yet you'll get, if that's not in the specification, you'll get somebody who will respond to the ITT and won't have to reference that and may not have the capability to do it. And yet you and I both know that in the new world, you know, long after COVID, post COVID, and we're now out of that phase, in this new world where everything's getting easier. Be great to talk to you about the new systems moving away from analog to IP, but to have that in the specification, which means that you are then able to respond. That it's a bit like for us, if people haven't specified, I don't know, a certified Microsoft Teams integration, what they end up with is what we call the Teams combo. But if it's not specified correctly, so like you, we find that if we can have conversations 2 years before a council go to market, a year before they go to market, then that you can have a two-way conversation which is very consultative, and still you may not win the work, but never mind, at least you've had an opportunity to support them, to clarify what it is that they're going to need, how are these meeting spaces going to be used, and what is the right latest technology that will not only do the job but will strip out the workflow, which is something you and I have talked about off air. But I know that's something that you're very passionate about.
Absolutely. I think when you've got large numbers of councillors and people coming into these meetings, it's so key that it's working properly. The amount of if you think about the amount of time that's wasted in a meeting if it goes wrong,
Yeah.
and as we move into the new legislation and people working remotely, if technology used to go wrong in an old room, you could probably cope to a certain extent, not
Work
ideal,
around. Yeah.
but as you go hybrid, if the technology is not working, suddenly you're wiping out whole swathes of people that should be listening to the discussion and then voting on those. And the technology has to be solid, and to be solid, it's no good someone turning up into a room and then realizing 5 minutes before the meeting it's broken. You need to be monitoring those systems so that before people do that it could
Yeah.
run. It appears to be running, and
So in that pre-market engagement, where obviously you're in your more consultative role, so does GVAV offer a project consulting role before there is a tender process? So is there a formal mechanism that councils rather, can contact GVAV and engage in what would you call that project or that program of work, where
well,
they're
well,
just trying to work out what they need and what they want?
it is. Consultation is key, whether that's through an independent consultant or through a GVAV. We will happily provide that expertise in there. You'll find that GVAV has got a large a large amount of AVIXA qualified people. That's the AV standards body.
In the procurement process, so ideally, I think you and I would agree that the more that councils can be supported, accepting that they've got very limited budgets, but that they can be supported to create a specification that's going to leave them with a system that should last, in my view, I think you would agree, it's got to last between 10 to 15 years. I mean, your average microphone system that you get in the council chambers these days, I think they are roughly designed to last at least 12 years, if not more. Maybe cameras a bit less. They tend to be, 5 years, 6 years that you'll get the latest PTZ cameras. But when you're supporting councils to get that right, I think the more that we can help them, or people like you rather, can help them to shape that up, and so it does exactly what it actually has an impact on would-be bidders. So suppliers like us, if we see a tender that has been correctly specified and robustly specified, it actually helps us to be very clear about what we're offering. We're not dealing with vagaries, ifs and buts and maybes. And given that, if you've got 5 or 6 organizations, or maybe even 10, and they're all putting a bid together, that's a huge amount of resource. And I think there's an onus of responsibility on the council to try as best they can to put a quality ITT document out there with a specification, because then people can be very efficient as to how they respond, because actually it's not cost-free to create a response to an ITT. I'm sure you've got some experience of that side of the fence when you are, outside the consultative role, you're just responding to a tender that's poorly drafted.
Absolutely. I think poorly drafted tenders are probably the most problematic ones. If it's not been pre-planned, if you've not brought in some of those specifications, to be able to bring it together, we've probably got a dozen people maybe that work on a tender, from project management through to designers, through to CAD people, through to costings and the and some of the admin teams, and
that's a huge resource that you've then got to put on to responding to that tender. And I imagine you're working on a number of projects simultaneously.
Absolutely. You can imagine that public sector particularly has similar financial cycles. So suddenly, if you've got a number of councils come out to tender, and you've got a number that are well specified, they can happen very quickly. Those that don't have the right specification they're beginning with, haven't had that in a pre-engagement, we'll obviously very happily help, but it's a much harder, much more intense process.
We were talking to a significant bid writer a couple of weeks back, and she was highlighting the necessity for demonstrations of products, or at least visiting like-for-like projects. So, and she was saying for her, that was the single missing piece that she doesn't see in tenders, which would give the greatest value to a council, is once they're looking, that they go to neighbouring projects, or they go to similar projects to see, well, how have they done it and what is their experience, and probably doing that without the supplier, I should imagine, probably the better value. But what are your thoughts on demonstrations and case studies and site visits to other projects?
Absolutely invaluable. There's a number of solutions out there, but actually knowing the solution from the start means you'll get better value out of the tender. So if we talk about products, maybe having some product demonstrations before tender means that the differences between a variety of wireless systems and wired systems out there, whether they might be on the table or might be flashed into the table. You're going to know the difference between the SaaS solutions. Obviously, if you look at the Civico, for instance, I think it's a fabulous certified Microsoft interface, and one of the things we're a big advocate for. Previously, we have provided our own SaaS solutions, but we believe that the way forward is going with certified routes, and seeing the difference.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that shout out. That's rather nice. I'll make sure that you get a nice cup of tea the next time you get the chocolate bars out, Steve, and a biscuit. I was also going to ask about the other side of the business. So you've done your consulting, you've got involved in the tender, and I imagine there's hundreds of things we could talk about within the tendering process,
Yes.
where viewers of this particular podcast could maybe learn some things. I'm hoping in the fullness of time we'll also have some democratic services officers on, and we'll be able to peer behind their curtain, because sometimes we also don't understand their world correctly. So how have they arrived at the specification? What are the levers that they're getting involved in? What are the pressures that they're under? One of the things I get pleasure in is if I'm writing, and I have written tenders,
Mm.
and when you've written a tender where you feel like you've put your best foot forward, you've offered what you think is really going to meet their requirements, and occasionally you don't win that bid. When that happens to me, I kind of think, well, do you know what? I've really done my best. I've offered you my best, and I don't think I could do it any better. And if that hasn't got us across the line on this occasion, then I just need to take that on the chin. The bit that I would ask, and again, I've spoken to others about this, it'd be great to get your perspective on it, is a key part of the system is after the bid is finished and you haven't won the bid, and then you're getting feedback. Sometimes that feedback can be nebulous or overly summarized. So, I'm an advocate is give us the feedback. We're all grown ups, and we can take whatever it is that you need to say about why this bid wasn't successful. It may be that the technology was correct, but was just worded incorrectly or not very well explained or whatever. I mean, what are your thoughts on that in terms of how councils could improve the quality of bids coming forward by actually reviewing bids that were not successful and giving those suppliers more feedback? I think the feedback that we often get is just so thin that it could almost be described as not really helpful. Whereas I think if they help us, the next bids that go through are inevitably going to be strengthened.
Absolutely. I mean, those that provide a scoring system before they go to market, and then if you get the market, the scores come back when it comes out back from market, are the most helpful, and they provide not only they'll focus the minds of those people that are writing a tender, so you get the best response there, but also sort of focus the minds going forward to make sure that the best responses come forward, and you're getting the best systems there. So, when you're marking through the schemes, if you've got 10 points on this item, 5 points on that,
Yeah.
let's. It's a very easy way of getting feedback, and also a really good way of making sure everyone gets a fair score at the end. And
Yeah, I love it. I kind of think the more feedback, the better. A few years back, I did a live stream in America for a company, an organization called the Personal Democracy Forum, and one of the speakers on there was Craig from Craig's List. And I had an opportunity to talk to him, and I asked him if he'd got any pearls of wisdom for Civico. And he said, what most people don't realize about him is he will typically, on a Thursday, go to his office, and he will be one of the people who answers the phone when people are phoning in the support line. So he said, if I want to know about my company and how it's been perceived on the ground, I hear that directly from customers. I don't wait to hear it from middle managers and senior executives, or it comes through on a report. He picks up the phone on a Thursday for a few hours in order to hear the voice of the customer. And I've never, ever forgotten that. And I know that GVAV are very strong on customer support, the raising of tickets, the responding, because I think often what we do, it's not about the technology on its own, it's about the relationship. And actually what happens after you've done the install and the system is all running perfectly, there will always be issues, there will always be problems. Technology is technology, the internet is the internet. And I find it's how you respond to those issues rather than the fact that those issues will arise, because they will arise, hopefully not too many, but when they do, who are you?
absolutely. I mean, customer service is key for us. It's about relationship. We're not interested in just making a sale and moving on. We can do that, but anybody can box shift.
Yeah.
Actually, this is about relationship. Our customers come back to us time and time again, and maybe they wandered off for a different project, and they come back and say, "We're sorry, we want to work with you." It's about
Yeah.
relationship. How do we make this work? And actually, that is about our people, one, but two, we back that off. We've got the Halo ITSM system. and that's key for
Great
us.
system.
It's a great system. It means we can measure either as something's reported electronically by the reporting system, or maybe someone can log something on the web, or it can also be emails, or you can call our hotline and then actually have someone speak to a person. But every
Yeah.
step is measured. It tells you what's the next step happening, and that's all a live. Not only is it a live feed, but it's got the record of what's happened, and that also feeds into some of the service reporting. Then once we'll
Yeah.
want to trigger updates with these clients and go, look, we know that X, Y, Z has gone wrong, and something it's early days, but you're starting to see the ability of Halo to use its AI engine to be able to start spotting trends.
Yeah.
As I say, it's early days, but if you start saying, oh, we're seeing this device here is going offline, then then that needs looking into further, doesn't it? If
I
we
love
see
that. And you've got quite a sophisticated support system in terms of ticketing. I think in your system, you've got automated ticketing, you've got manual ticketing, you've got telephone, you've got email. And when you're using our system, there's obviously the live chat for when you're in real meetings where officers are able to just discreetly use live chat to say what on earth is happening with camera number 2 or whatever it would be. So I know that your support system, beyond the live meeting and the live meeting monitoring, you are heavily involved in the whole rounded package of support, not just one method.
Absolutely. I think the multifaceted approach gives us the most flexibility, but also I think we need to practically know if something's gone wrong, but equally you need to be able to talk to us. It's about relationship. That's the only way that things are going to work.
Yeah.
I think that ask your providers what is their support mechanism, what happens in their level of support. Day one is installing. What happens is moving to business as usual. Maybe include a section within the tender to write about that. What does that look like?
I was going to ask that, you have a project manager. When I looked at your structure previously, when I was doing some research for this this show, that you have a project manager who usually sees your projects through from inception through to completion. Could you say a bit about the role of the project manager?
So what you're going to find with some of the integrators out there is that you almost got departments working in silos, going from design department through to through to those that are installing it, through to those that are engineering it, and those through and are programming it. So, but our project manager is always across there from cradle to grave. They've been part of that in the inception of the idea. They know what's going to be. They have a good idea of what's going on with the projects designs. They know they've probably had looks to look at, can it actually be delivered? And then obviously, as would hope to win the projects, coming forward out of that, we can have those meetings on site and start to be able to manage that customer relationship. There's always, it's one point of contact. You don't need to work out who I need to call for any given moment. You can just call the manager and talk to them. Project manager is that flow of information. They'll talk with, often there's builders works involved in these projects. Often there's IT that needs to draw into these projects. Often there's going to be and different stakeholders within the organisation that we need to engage with. So it's one point of contact, glues it all together.
I love it. And then something that you offer, which would differentiate you as a larger system integrator, is the fact that, and I've been there and I've seen this, you've got almost like an aircraft hangar where you're able to set out, perhaps you've got the correct words for it, where you're able to set out somebody's system. So once you've won a piece of work, as I understand it, you have a design that gets signed off, and then you build that system in your aircraft hangar in order to prove off-site verification. I think you called it FAT or something. Is that right?
Yeah. So that's right. So one of the again, something that's quite key for people, you'll find smaller integrators will often get the equipment in. They'll lack warehouse space, and that'll get to site, and that'll be brought in just in time and be brought to site. And then people try and program on site, and it's only there that they may discover issues. It can take longer locally program on site. So the GVAV way, we've got more warehouse space than any other integrator in the UK. So having 6 warehouses across set out strategically allows us to buy the equipment in plenty of time. We can do something called vesting, so that arrives to us, and then that's vested. That equipment, as it's paid for, it belongs to the council or organisation. That can then be built into racks. That can then be fully programmed and tested off-site, and we and that allows us to make sure that everything's gone right. Obviously, as technology evolves, sometimes there's different things coming from different manufacturers. It all needs testing, and we need to make sure that if it works off-site, and then it goes what we call a factory acceptance test or FAT test, that can be witnessed by the organisation, be it council or government, however, enterprise, and also it gives them the ability to comment on some of the interfaces. We'll have also gone through what we call user interface workshops to finalise that, to design that interface, but also allows them to look at something and go, actually, could we make this change?
I also know with a lot of your stuff that you've done that apart from the pre-market engagement, apart from then the tendering process and the factory acceptance testing, that your starting point once you won a project is actually looking at the dynamics of the meeting space and the acoustic qualities of that meeting space. And I know that you've got some tools and techniques which, let's be honest, some of the smaller system integrators can't really cater for, but actually putting in £500,000 or £300,000 worth of audio equipment into a meeting space where you haven't understood that meeting space and where are its pockets of dropout, or what is the cabling, are there sufficient network points in the right place? I know that you go into that in great detail. And again, a bit like I said before, is not only are you not willing to sidestep some of the unpleasant things that may need to be raised in a procurement process because you're wanting to get it right. Most of that, as I understand it, you don't want to disappoint the customer. Once you've won the project, you don't want to then be bringing out, oh, by the way, did you realize this? And oh, by the way, did you realize this? Which is, I know some people have got the strategy, win the work and then raise the nasties. Whereas what you guys are doing are raising the nasties up front and saying, look, if you don't want us on this basis, then actually you're probably not our customer. I was looking at that with on a particular project where they had an issue where there was a speaker directly behind the microphone. So when the member opened up their microphone, what they didn't realize, the audio was going through the microphone and then back round into the speaker, and was then, too close to the microphone. And all they needed to do was to have a system where they could turn that speaker off, that if I've got my microphone on, I don't need a speaker behind me. And therefore that audio can't come into the microphone, and you've mitigated what would otherwise be reverb going around. And yes, the microphones these days are highly sophisticated and tend to take out much of that reverb. But if it's there, it'll be having it has the potential to have some impact. And in this one particular environment, it certainly did. But just taking that out and writing a program to take out that audio, so saying, this speaker should not be working within the parameter of XYZ microphones. A very simple solution, but if you've not catered for that at the beginning, you find it, yeah.
Absolutely. We had a council that we know came out to tender, and they wanted the chamber as one zone of audio, and then they wanted a zone of audio for the public gallery, which on paper made sense. But then, we also know that the previous supplier had say that they'd had that, and what they'd done is had a single zone of audio, as specification said, and as you say, that loudspeaker fed into the microphone system. That council could never get enough volume because the specification was wrong. The specification said one zone of audio, therefore that's what the system had been built around. And then you'd had an integrator who either decided to keep the price down or didn't realise that might be an issue. Either way, it was the wrong system for that particular council, and they came out to market again to try and fix that, which is just a waste of time
for everybody and money.
Yeah.
One last thing before we wrap up, Steve. As always with you, whenever you and I get talking, there's just so many bits and pieces that we could spend an hour on each and every one of these, and I'm trying to skirt across it. So forgive me if I'm being uh, racing through some of these issues. A lot of the environments that you work in are heritage environments. So would you be willing to say a little bit about how you treat grade 1 and grade 2 council chambers, some of which are the most, I went and visited Middlesbrough not so long back. What a beautiful, absolutely stunning environment. It's about to receive a facelift, I think, at some point, but the fundamentals of that meeting space are just breathtakingly beautiful. And with the latest technologies, apart from, there are so many things you can't do, but actually because of AV over IP, we can now support these pristine environments, but without damaging the fabric of the building, without necessarily touching the furniture, and we can actually remove ugly speakers and ugly bits and pieces that have arrived out of necessity. We can actually now use the latest technology in order to enhance the visual aesthetics of those rooms rather than diminish them.
Absolutely. And again, that's about getting specification right. If you just ask for a speaker system, then larger boxes, not necessarily of the right color, will become a cheaper option. But if you've got these beautiful listed buildings, that's not necessarily going to be the right option. If it's been designed beforehand, before it goes to market, or or as part of engagement, then actually you could have these really thin, lovely speakers that can be color matched. So
Yes.
you could have them rail colored to a wood, or it could be it's black that fades into a little area. It could be that you in terms of microphones, it could be that if you've got these desks, you can have things flash mounted into them fine. But
Yeah.
the wireless systems are extremely good nowadays and bring
Yeah.
value to give you a kind of multi-purpose space.
We had an issue recently in an installation for Hackney Council where we were able to utilize the new Oricast hearing assist. So rather than ripping up the carpet and putting down wires all over the place, they've been able to use the latest Oricast system, which will Bluetooth 2 channels, one to members and one to members of the public. So when the meeting goes into a private session, they're able to drop one of the channels, which is going to the members of the public. So it means that only those people who are entitled to hear the meeting actually get to hear the meeting. Such an advance that most people wouldn't yet realize that actually this Oricast is going to be so profound in terms of supporting people who've got a hearing assist need, and yet reducing the cost of an AV installation into a large environment and small environments.
We could probably spend another hour talking about hard of hearing systems, but you're absolutely right there. The traditional AFILs, audio frequency induction loop systems, they had what they call.
I knew you'd know the correct term.
always. But they not only they had what you call low spill designs, which sort of limits how much they can be picked up on hearing aids, but actually with the right equipment you could pick up on that from a long way away. So if someone wanted to listen to a private meeting, they didn't necessarily meet the standards required for that.
We see, one of the things that excites me is I love the idea of distilling things down and streamlining wherever we can. We can now do this with IP systems. So for us, getting rid of webcasting equipment, so you don't need webcasting equipment anymore. You don't need Teams laptops and OBS laptops and output in all of that. So being able to just bake that into the system as a generic part of the system, and trying to take the world of your average committee officer who's just trying to run a meeting and getting rid of as much technology as possible and just going back to life before COVID, where you could run a meeting with one, and if it's a large meeting, perhaps two, and just making it easy. It's like, why would we not want to do that? And for me, it's a real pleasure to see that technology is now enabling us to do that. People aren't necessarily going to save money because the price of computing has gone up. Even now, the latest chips, a lot of the microphone manufacturers are having to increase their prices. Display screens are going up, the cameras are going up. But ultimately, if you get the right system, it's not the cost of the technology is where councils are going to save money. What we're seeing is actually the reduction of workflow, the reduction of the amount of people that used to have to get involved. So if you have got a seamless integration with modern.gov, which is actually the secret source, either modern.gov or Qualigraph or whatever it's going to be, and syndicating that information right the way through into the council chamber or the committee rooms, inform the microphones, inform the cameras, set the webcasting up, and do all of that without the officer having to do anything, is where the cost saving is.
I think that's absolutely key, really. The technology should always be seamless. You don't go into a design phase starting to say, how much technology can I put in there to confuse the operator?
I have met them. I have met those.
Well, yes, absolutely.
They're out there.
But the key part is that actually the operator, all they want to do is be able to run a meeting and go, microphone, can I hear? Yes. Is the cameras relatively automated or something I can do to assist me there, keeping minimal there? How do I keep these votes running? If you've got people in a chamber and working remotely, maybe bringing an extra chamber in, as will undoubtedly happen in these government reorganisations. Well, if we design that from the beginning, it can happen seamlessly. You could have multiple councils maybe knowing they might be coming together. We could put the right systems into each one. As it moves into the new phase, then those can be joined together, and then maybe longer term there is a new chamber, but maybe there's not. What we've done is actually, by just investing in the right equipment, and in the first place, we've got it right, so there's no panic to try and get things very quickly.
We should round off, but as always, I really would like to extend an invitation to invite you back. I think we could pick on any one of the subjects that you very kindly have given us your insights on, and focus maybe in a couple of shows. We could focus on one or two things. Once I get some feedback from our listeners as to what they're interested in, that will start to shape up this particular podcast. It's a new podcast at the moment, Steve, as you know, and we're just finding our feet. We're probably going to get a few things wrong. We'll probably get a few things right in the fullness of time, but we are up and running.
I mean, if I can encourage listeners in one thing, let's get a demonstration. Get a demonstration either pre-market or as part of the bid process. Build an extra week into that process, and these are the dates we're doing the demonstration on, and have them back to back, and understand the differences between the proposals from different providers.
Steve, I really appreciate that you made time to come on the show, one of our early guests. So, it's great, particularly to have you, because I know the wealth of you, the years of experience that you bring to the table, and hopefully our listeners will have taken some good nuggets from there.
Oh, well, absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to be here, and looking forward to more shows as it goes on.